Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. This is Dr. Blakeney, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Little Rock Nine. To give you some perspective, this event happened at Little Rock High School, Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957. 3 years earlier, in 1954, we had the Brown versus Board of Education, which essentially was led by Thurgood Marshall and a couple of other lawyers, and they argued that segregation of schools was not legal. The case was won, so segregated schools around the United States had to desegregate. In other words, if you had an all-black school, if you had an all-white school, you now had to integrate them. So in Little Rock, they were trying to do this. And so the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, led by a woman named Daisy Bates in Little Rock, Arkansas, they decided they wanted to send students to Little Rock Central High. The governor, his name was Orville Faubus, he did not. He said that the students would not go there. I believe he said the streets would be blood red before a black student enters Little Rock Central High School. So we had this confrontation. 1954, the NAACP asks students, do you want to go to the school? And through a process of elimination, we end up with 9 students. But that wasn't originally what happened. Originally, there were about 220 students or so who signed up. They said, we want to go to the school. But then they had to narrow that down. So they said, we're just going to accept juniors and seniors who have an established high school record. So that knocked it down to 80 or something. Then they said your grades have to be good. You couldn't have any C's, for example. So that dropped it down to 40. Then they said you wouldn't be able to participate in any extracurricular activities like sports or band or anything like that. So that knocked it down to 20. And then eventually, I believe there were 18 names that were presented, and 11 of those students wanted to go, but we have 9, of course, so it was a Little Rock 9. So on September 3rd, they tried to go to school. At least they were going to try to go to school. But the governor, the night before, said on TV, he said, I'm going to send the Arkansas National Guard to stop you from doing this. So Mrs. Bates had to change plans. The NAACP had to change plans, and they decided that they were going to call it off for that day. So 8 of the 9 students had phones at their houses. Remember, this is 1954. It's not today. So not all of them had. So one of the students, her name is Elizabeth Eckford. She didn't get the message because she didn't have a phone, and so the 8 students went to one place and she went to another. She didn't know what was happening. She was getting hassled. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of people that were heckling her, and so she went and she sat on a bench, and then somebody came and sat with her until they could get her back to her family. A couple weeks later, nobody knew what was going to happen. They didn't know if President Eisenhower was going to do anything to stop this from happening, and eventually he did. He federalized some National Guard troops from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. They came down, and the students were escorted into the building. I believe it was September 23rd or September 25th, 1957, and the students were in class. The National Guard actually stood outside their classrooms. They couldn't go in the classrooms or the bathrooms or anything like that, but they stood outside and they escorted them from class. So what are the results of this? Well, one of them is that one of those students, the only senior, his last name is Green, he graduated from Little Rock Central that year. The second thing that happened was the Board of Education for Little Rock decided they would rather close high schools than segregate them. So in 1958, there weren't any active high schools in Little Rock. They just shut them down. No school. So some of the students moved away. All 9 of the Little Rock 9 were successful. Most of them graduated from a university or a college and were very successful. And of course, today we don't have segregated schools. And this is part of the legacy of the Little Rock Nine. So I hope you learned a little bit more about this, and I look forward to seeing you in the classroom soon. Take care. Bye-bye.